Picture this. It's the night of November 28th, 1981.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah. You are standing on the chilly, bustling curb right outside of Boston Logan Airport. The air smells like, jet exhaust and freezing rain.
Just that classic miserable northeast winter weather.
Exactly. And the deafening roar of jet engines, it just mixes with this endless glow of taxi headlights pulling up to the terminal. And standing there amidst all this chaos is a 25-year-old Harvard architecture student named Joan Webster.
Right, and she's got her purse, carry-on, and she is waiting by this heavy strike suitcase.
She had just flown back from a Thanksgiving trip, right? Visiting her family in New Jersey.
Yeah, she's likely exhausted, feeling that sort of post-holiday slump that we all get, but she's anxious to get back to her dorm in Cambridge for a Sunday study group.
But she never makes it to Cambridge.
No, she doesn't.
A cab driver waiting in line actually watches as this mysterious man in his 40s with curly hair, a beard, and these round glasses, he just intercepts her.
And it gets intense fast. When the cab driver goes to, load Joan's heavy striped suitcase, the man just snaps.
Right. He flashes this sudden, intense anger, just screaming at the driver about how he's handling the luggage.
And then he grabs the bag, leads Joan away from the cab stand, and the two of them just vanish into a blue taxi.
Which is just chilling, because that is the last time anyone ever saw Joan Webster alive.
It's the inciting incident for a mystery that would haunt New England for decades. I mean, it starts as a standard missing persons case, but mutates into something far more insidious.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we have a really vital mission. We are pulling back the curtain on two notorious chilling disappearances in Massachusetts.
Joan Webster and the lesser-known but deeply, deeply connected case of Marie Iannutti.
Right. We are going to examine the evidence from our sources today, just like criminal investigators.
Because our goal is to uncover exactly what happens when the justice system gets, tunnel vision.
Exactly. We're looking at what happens when investigators just stop following the clues and instead they force the pieces of a puzzle to fit a predetermined picture.
Yeah, this is fundamentally an exploration of confirmation bias, of lost evidence, and really the ghosts of a compromised investigation.
We are going to look at the mechanics of how a rush to judgment can just shatter multiple families, leaving this trail of institutional cover-ups and questions that are still echoing today.
It's a lot to unpack.
It really is. So let's start with Joan. Where does the dread actually begin for her family? Because I imagine her parents weren't instantly panicking the literal moment her flight landed.
No, of course not. The dread sort of builds over the next few days. It's the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, and Joan's mother, Terry, back in New Jersey, is just starting to spiral.
Because she hasn't heard from her.
Right. Joan missed that Sunday study group. Then she missed classes on Monday. And that was entirely out of character for her. She was a highly disciplined architecture student.
Right, you don't just skip out on Harvard grad school.
Exactly. So Terry has Joan's older sister, who also lives in the Boston area, go check the dorm room.
Oh, man. Which has to be a terrifying walk to take. Just approaching that door, not knowing what's on the other side.
Totally. And the scene at the dorm only confirms the mother's worst fears. There are these frantic notes from friends taped to the door.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and inside, unopened mail is just piling up. There is zero sign Joan has even been in the room since before the holiday break.
So the family files a missing persons report immediately, I assume.
Immediately, yeah. And then the very next morning, the first massive clue drops.
And it's nowhere near Cambridge. A fisherman calls Joan's father's office. He had been walking through this really bleak, freezing marshland in Saugus, Massachusetts.
Just desolate area.
Yeah, and sitting right there on the muddy riverbank is Joan's wallet. It's got her ID, her credit cards, no cash, and a little card telling whoever finds it to contact her dad.
Which is such a specific, eerie thing to find. So the police race out to the marsh. And not far from the wallet, they find Joan's red leather pocketbook with her checkbook still inside.
But the way they were found is strange, right?
Very. From the positioning, it looks as though someone might have just tossed these items out the window of a moving car, like right from the highway overpass above the riverbank.
And the geography here is the first massive red flag.
Huge red flag.
If you look at a map of the Boston area, Saugus is about 6 miles north of Logan Airport.
Right.
But Cambridge, where Harvard is, and where Joan was actually headed, is west. The marsh is in the exact opposite direction of her destination.
Which immediately signals to investigators that she was intercepted. I mean, she didn't just take a wrong turn.
No, definitely not. And because Joan's father was a well-connected former CIA employee, the authorities just bring out the heavy artillery.
Oh yeah, we're talking helicopters scanning the coastline, police dogs in the brush, scuba divers combing the freezing waters of the marsh. They went all out.
They also tracked down that original cab driver at the airport, right? The one the mysterious man yelled at.
Yes, and the driver gives them a remarkably detailed description of this guy in his 40s with the round glasses.
And the police take this seriously enough to commission a composite sketch. But, and this is where I just lose my mind, they never release it to the public.
No, they keep it totally under wraps.
They don't even show it to Joan's professors and classmates when they interview them.
It really speaks to the utter dysfunction and, frankly, the cognitive dissonance of the early investigation.
It makes absolutely no sense.
Well, the police seem to be operating under this strange, unfounded assumption that Joan, this highly responsible graduate student, had just run off on her own to clear her head.
That investigative logic is just, it's absurd. That is like issuing an Amber Alert for a kidnapped child, having the license plate number of the kidnapper's car, and purposefully hiding it from the public.
It's a perfect analogy.
If you have a suspect, or even just a person of interest who was last seen getting into a car with the victim, you plaster that sketch on every telephone pole in the state?
You would think so.
Oh.
But they were actively working against their own evidence. I mean, they were assuring the public they had interviewed everyone on Joan's flight, only to be publicly corrected by a passenger who hadn't been spoken to at all.
They were just entirely disorganized.
Completely. And then 2 months pass. It's January 1982. The police get a call from a Greyhound bus terminal in downtown Boston.
Oh, this part is so bizarre.
It really is. An employee is clearing out unpaid temporary storage lockers. And inside one of them, Joan's heavy striped suitcase.
The timeline of this discovery is what makes it so baffling, though, because terminal records show that specific locker was rented at 10:30 in the morning on Sunday.
Right.
Wait, Joan's flight landed at 10:30 p.m. on Saturday night, so this suitcase was checked into a locker 12 hours after she landed.
Precisely. 12 hours later, and nothing inside was stolen. All her clothes, her toiletries, everything was still there.
It is maddening. But before investigators can even begin to figure out how her bag walked into a bus terminal 12 hours later, the entire investigation gets hijacked.
It takes a wild turn.
Yeah, like how does a scald Ivy League missing persons case suddenly get linked to a completely different forgotten murder?
Enter Assistant District Attorney Tim Burke. In 1982, Burke is assigned to Joan's case. And out of the blue, he gets a call from a woman in a neighboring county who is just begging for help with her sister's unsolved murder from 3 years prior.
And her sister's name was Marie Iannuti.
Exactly.
Paint a picture of Marie's world for us, because from the sources, it feels miles away from Harvard.
It's a completely different world. So we are traveling back to August 1979 in working-class East Boston. We're at this chaotic, loud wedding reception.
Okay.
20-year-old Marie Iannuti is there with her boyfriend, David. And sometime during the night, David rips his pants and decides he just wants to go home.
As you do, I guess.
Right. But Marie isn't ready to leave. She wants to hit the after party. They get into this fierce, screaming argument, and David storms off.
Leaving her there.
Yeah. Ree finds a ride to the after party with some friends and eventually ends up at a late-night bar near Logan Airport.
And this is where things get really dark. It's 1:25 a.m. She's leaving the bar. A local fisherman named Lenny Paradiso offers her a ride home.
But she turns him down. She tells him she is, quote, meeting someone, and she walks around the corner.
And 2 days later, Marie's body is found. She had been strangled.
And the location is the linchpin here. She is found in the exact same Saugus marshland where Joan's wallet and purse would be discovered 3 years later.
That is quite the coincidence. But if we pause and look at how the justice system and the media treated these two women, it is just a masterclass in classism and resource allocation.
Oh, totally night and day.
Joan was wealthy, went to Harvard, had a CIA father. She got helicopters and scuba divers. It was front page news.
Right. The whole city stopped.
But Marie was a working class girl from East Boston. Her murder was largely ignored by the big media outlets. She didn't get helicopters. She was essentially forgotten until Adia Burke realized her case could be a convenient stepping stone to solve the high-profile Harvard mystery.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
From an investigative standpoint, Adia Burke suddenly has 2 cases tied to one geographic location. And in Marie's case, there were 2 main suspects.
Okay, let's break them down.
First, there's David, the boyfriend she argued with at the wedding. He was known to be incredibly abusive, I mean, he had actually strangled her just months prior to her murder.
Wait, he had already strangled her before.
Yes,
And his behavior after she died was completely unhinged. When Marie's family went to his house to get a dress for her wake, they saw what looked like blood on his stairs.
which police later claimed was just paint, but still.
Right, but at the grand jury, her family testified David had deep gouge marks and scratches all over his hands, which he kept changing his story about.
Yeah, the classic changing alibi.
And then, at Marie's wake, David literally threw a marijuana joint into her coffin.
Just bizarre, disrespectful behavior.
Oh.
And then he skipped her funeral altogether. He actually flew to New Jersey under a fake name and got arrested for stealing luggage at the Newark airport.
I mean, how is this guy not the prime suspect?
Because 88 Burke is focused entirely on the second suspect, Lenny Paradiso.
The fisherman from the bar.
Right, the guy who offered Marie a ride. Lenny sold fish to a lobster company right next to the marsh where her body was dumped.
Okay, so he knows the area.
Very well. But most importantly to Burke, Lenny had a dark, extensive criminal history of sexual violence, including abducting a 16-year-old girl and attempting to rape a college student he had offered a ride to.
So you can see why Burke looks at him. Adia Burke is desperate to close both of these high-profile mysteries, so he laser focuses entirely on Lenny.
He theorizes that Lenny killed Marie in '79 and then 3 years later picked Joan up at the airport in his cab and killed her too.
And to solidify this theory, the ADA gets what looks like a silver bullet. A jailhouse informant, an inmate named Robert Bond, comes forward claiming Lenny confessed everything to him while they were sharing a cell.
But we have to talk about how these jailhouse informant situations actually work.
Yeah, please do, because from the outside, it always sounds so convenient that a prime suspect suddenly pours their heart out to a total stranger in a cell.
It does sound convenient because it often is. In the 1980s, the system practically incentivized fabricated confessions. Prosecutors were rewarded for securing convictions, not necessarily finding the absolute truth.
So it's basically a transaction.
Exactly. Inmates knew that if they could hand a prosecutor a confession on a silver platter, they'd get their own sentences drastically reduced. And the informant, Robert Bond, tells a highly specific, very grim story.
He claims Lenny picked Joan up at Logan in an unlicensed cab. Lenny then drove her to a pier where he kept his boat, which was named the Malafa, which translates to evil woman in Italian.
And according to Bond, Lenny offered Joan a drink on the boat. When she rejected his advances, Lenny struck her on the right side of the head with a whiskey bottle, sexually assaulted her, took the boat out to sea, and dumped her body in the ocean.
God, that's horrific.
It is. And Bond claimed Lenny said there was so much blood on the deck that a few days later, he took the Malafa out and intentionally sank it to destroy the evidence.
And based heavily on this really detailed informant testimony, Lenny is put on trial and convicted of Marie's murder in 1984.
Right, just Marie's.
But because the ADA tied the two narratives together so publicly, the public essentially considers Joan's case solved too. Lenny goes to prison for life. But if you're listening to this and screaming at your dashboard about how convenient this all sounds, you are not alone.
No, you're really not. The informant's story was fundamentally flawed, but the prosecution just pushed it through anyway.
It's like a desperate college student buying a term paper online. You glance at it, the formatting looks perfect, it answers the prompt, the font is right, but the second you actually look closely, you realize all the citations are completely fake.
That is a great way to put it.
There was a massive glaring hole in this confession. Court and bankruptcy records from a federal judge prove that Lenny's boat, the Malafa, had already sunk due to a broken rudder in August of 1981.
And Joan Webster went missing in November of 1981.
Lenny did not even have a boat when Joan disappeared.
He didn't. This is the danger of tunnel vision. It's cognitive bias in action.
It's terrifying.
It is. When investigators build an entire theory around one suspect, any contradictory evidence is viewed as an annoyance to be swatted away, rather than, a clue to be investigated.
Yeah, just ignore it.
The authorities even raised the sunken boat from the harbor, found absolutely zero physical evidence of a crime, but they still pushed forward with the narrative because they needed the win.
Which brings us to the moment that completely shatters the official story. Fast forward to April 1990. We are in Hamilton, Massachusetts. It's a quiet, rural, heavily wooded area. A woman is walking her dog along a drainage ditch when she spots what looks like a deflated volleyball.
But it's not a volleyball.
No.
It is a human skull. And dental records confirm it is Joan Webster. And the location of her remains destroys the entire foundation of the prosecution's case.
Because she wasn't dumped in the deep ocean off a boat. She was buried in a shallow grave hidden under multiple layers of logs, a full hour northeast of the airport.
The discovery completely invalidates the jailhouse confession that helped put Lenny Paradiso away.
It tears it all down.
But there's one eerie detail we have to mention here. The skull did have a large fracture on the right side, which actually matched the informant's claim about the whiskey bottle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but everything else, the boat, the ocean, the timeline, was a total fabrication.
Let's talk about the physical evidence that was ignored because everyone was so fixated on Lenny. Think about the fingerprints on Joan's suitcase at the Greyhound bus terminal.
Right, the ones they found early on.
Well, they tested those prints against Lenny. They were not a match. So what did they do? They just shrugged and moved on.
Which is infuriating.
And hairs were found at the shallow grave in Hamilton. They tested them against Lenny. Not a match. They ignored it.
The tunnel vision was so severe it led to the heartbreaking destruction of evidence, too. After Joan's remains were found in the woods, her grieving family quickly cremated her.
Which is understandable for a grieving family, but...
But Joan's case was still an open homicide investigation. By Massachusetts law, it is strictly illegal to cremate a body in an open case.
Wait, really?
Yes. Yet the authorities were so locked into the idea that Lenny did it, and since Lenny was already in prison, nobody stepped in to enforce the law. The cremation destroyed any future forensic opportunities.
Wow. So if Lenny Paradiso's boat was already at the bottom of the ocean, and his fingerprints weren't on the luggage, and his hair wasn't at the grave, who actually killed Joan Webster? Who had the geographic proximity to bury a body in that specific remote woodland?
Well, it leads us down a rabbit hole of alternative theories and what investigators call ghost profiles.
Let's introduce Dr. Jonah Juergen. The area in Hamilton where Joan was buried was very close to property owned by Harvard, and living right near that remote burial site was Dr. Juergen, a social sciences professor.
This is where the story enters a very dark institutional shadow. Because when investigative reporters recently tried to look into Dr. Juergen, they discovered he has essentially been erased.
Now, what does a ghost profile practically mean? Because it's not just someone deleting their Facebook page, right?
Far from it. It means property records, university faculty logs, historical archives, and public databases have been systematically scrubbed.
That takes effort.
A lot of effort. Aside from a rare book floating around on eBay and a couple of brief clippings from the 1970s, he does not exist on paper. He resigned from a previous post without explanation, worked in administration at Harvard during the time Joan was a student there, and then entirely vanishes from the public record.
Which is wild.
Erasing someone to that degree requires real institutional power.
And when you pair that deliberate erasure with the fact that Joan's father was a confirmed member of the CIA, it completely reframes the case. It is well documented that during the Cold War and into the 1980s, the CIA heavily recruited from academic departments and research programs at elite universities like Harvard.
We can actually ground these suspicions in hard, undeniable facts about the justice system at the time, too.
How so?
Well, the 1980s in Massachusetts was a notoriously corrupt era for jurisprudence. Appellate and Supreme Courts eventually overturned at least 120 convictions from that specific era due to systemic prosecutorial misconduct.
120. How does the system become that broken?
It becomes basically a factory of coercion. We're talking widespread witness intimidation, misrepresenting forensic evidence to juries, and prosecutors purposefully withholding vital information that would help the defense.
Just to get the win.
Exactly. In Lenny's case, other inmates eventually came forward and signed sworn affidavits. They testified that the informant, Robert Bond, was literally walking around the cell block with Lenny's legal papers, copying facts onto a yellow legal pad so he could craft a highly detailed fake confession to sell to the DA.
That is just despicable. Lenny Paradiso died in a prison hospital in 2008, right? And he maintained his innocence in both of these murders to his dying day.
He did. When investigators lock onto a narrative, the collateral damage is just immense. Marie and Udi's family walked away feeling completely used.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
They realized their daughter's tragic death wasn't treated as a priority by the system. It was treated as a convenient tool for the DA to build a high-profile case for the wealthy Harvard student.
And Joan Webster's family never got real answers. By fixating on a phantom boat ride, the system let the real killer, or killers, just walk away. It's a tragedy of systemic failure.
Before we wrap up, I want you to think about one specific, lingering detail.
Okay, what is it?
Think about that Greyhound bus locker in downtown Boston. Joan's massive striped suitcase was checked in at 10:30 a.m. on Sunday morning. That is 12 full hours after her plane landed at Logan Airport.
Yeah, that timeline changes everything.
It does. If she was murdered on Saturday night, that means the killer woke up the next morning, took her heavy suitcase, and walked right through a bustling, crowded downtown Boston bus terminal in broad daylight to hide it.
That is so brazen.
Right. Why would a killer take that massive risk? Was it a sick, calculated game of misdirection to make it look like she ran away? Or does it mean something far more terrifying?
Oh, God.
Does it mean John Webster was actually still alive for hours and hours after she stepped out into the cold air of that airport?
That is a chilling thought to leave on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, trust your instincts, and always question the official story.